Trying to count to Mississauga 10 times in my head. Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Joel Harden. As I mentioned before, I'm the member of Provincial Parliament for Ottawa Centre. Very, very happy to be sharing this digital space with all of you, especially some of our guests who we've asked to help us stir our minds a little bit. I'm sitting in front of the beautiful Crow River here in Marmora, Ontario. I'm on my way home from the legislature, and this is Earth Day, and this is a conversation we are having about how we can protect the Ottawa River. In a particular conversation our community's been engaged in around a large nuclear waste facility. It's been proposed upriver from us at Chalk River. So I want to thank every single one of you for tuning in tonight. I want to hand the microphone to my good friend, Verna McGregor from the Kinnigan Zibi Anishinaabe First Nation. Verna, I was wondering if you could help us start off this conversation in a good way. And thank you so very much, my friend, for being here.
Oh, miigwech, Joel. Hello, everybody. Kwekakina, bonjour tout le monde. For an indigenous cause, Kitagan Zibin and Dojaba, Do Damashich and Kipanesi. I'd like to welcome you here to our traditional unceded lands. For those of you who don't know our unceded lands, it means that we never signed treaty giving up our lands here. And I'm very honored to be here today to talk about an important issue such as nuclear waste, because also too as well, it's International Earth Day, or it's Earth Day, which we call Ishkakinkwek Kijikat. And for us too as well, really quickly, one of our teachings is that women are the keepers of the water, men are keepers of the fire, both sacred elements, part of the medicine wheel, both necessary to sustain life here. And so one of the biggest teachings of the water is that it connects all of us. And plus also too as well, our 72%, approximately 72% of our bodies is composed of water. So what we do to the water, eventually we do to ourselves. So on that note, I'm going to just say a quick little prayer. I have a smudge. I send you a good virtual smudge here through your computers and the power of the internet, the World Wide Web. I have my eagle feather and I say, miigwech keje manedo. Onje negashketo je monjid non wanoje non go mamwe kakina pamadsjik. Shwen mishnoni nabigis. Miigwech onje kakina gagishen dononje mam de gain in the kimenon. Shkaki question cause on in the Kimanan, we do qua kakina pamats, jigdanis were gonche onje nagadawabdan, kakina guch in the Kimanan. Migwech onje kakina ete kish gon kizis to be kizis a shichonang shuk. We do qua yan nokmis nan onje nagadawabdan, kakina guch nibi punk sing. Saigon, CB, a such kichigagam. We do qua gikweg onje nagadawabdan, kakina guch nibi. Miigwech onje ya ishkude kagimi jin chimino apachtoya we do kwagin wak chmashkal suwaj on cookage nagadawabdan kakina kuchya ishkude miigwech onje na sewen kagimi jin chino minopimatsion we do kwa kakina pamadz jig daji akos jig mamwe ya COVID-19 jin kadege we do kwa genabigis kanche squat ningwe de simen ya Miigwech onje kakina wesi suck. Pimadigajik, Pamudagajik, Pamisuajik, Mijimwajik, Newagadajik, Kakina Gujwido Quakap, Kakina Janagdawabran, Kakina Guj Wesi suck. Miigwech onje kakina Nijinwen Daganak, Nanokmis non Mshoms and non Dabano Jishak, Kakina Negetel Zajika Shich. Shwen Mishnoni Nabigas Kajemanido, Kinka de Bendan Kakina, Guch Kinka Mojan Kakina, we do qua Kakina Mam de Gawi Wisnajik, the Magazajik, Ayakuzajik Kaye, Akuzajik, Shwen Mishnon, Mie, Miigwech, 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 Miigwech. And really, in a nutshell, what I'm saying is thank you, Creator, for allowing us to come together here tonight to talk about nuclear waste. Or the earth, actually how we have to look after the earth. And I say thank you for the 4 elements, which includes the earth, the water, the air, the fire, all necessary for creating, sustaining life. Thank you for all the animals, all our relatives, and that we don't ask things in vain, and that you guide us well on our journey here, and that to remind us before that too, one of the biggest teachings here is that this represents all the four colors of people on the earth, and we were all given the same instructions that we have to look after the earth. And one of the biggest teachings is, regardless of our differences, our understandings, our language, our beliefs, what binds us together is that we all share this earth. And so I'm very honored that we have this conversation tonight. So miigwech, Joel, and it's back to you.
Miigwech, Verna, thank you so much for being here, for your friendship, and for those teachings. Again, just very thankful for starting off this in a good way, starting our conversation off in a good way. Okay, folks. So again, thank you so very much for those of you who are tuning in to this broadcast on Earth Day, on protecting the Ottawa River, on our obligations to doing that, with a particular focus on the concern many of us have around the large nuclear waste facility that's being proposed upriver from us in Chalk River. We have three folks, including Verna, who will be one of those, adding some further insights about this. And the first person I would like to pass the mic to is my good friend, Councillor Teresa Kavanaugh, who played a leadership role in our city recently at the Environment Committee, making sure that this was a discussion that took place that our city officials were aware of. Teresa, I want to thank you so very much for being with us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Joel. And it's a pleasure to be here on Earth Day to talk about something very important to us, and that's our supply of water. As Verna's pointed out, we are water. It's a good to hear about women being the water. So, and maybe that's why I love it so much. But it's something that's been very important to me. I actually can see it from my back window here. I'm very fortunate. Just a little glimpse of it, and I think how lucky I am every day. It matters so much to us, and I didn't think about it as being something for an election issue, but I have to say that I was well aware of the importance of it in terms of our drinking water. And one of the first things that happens when you're become a counselor is you have to have a mandatory session to learn about drinking water and its importance. And that's because of Walkerton. And I think we all remember Walkerton. So we had this mandatory session to learn about the process because we're the ones that vote. We're the ones that vote on the quality of water. And it made me realize how important it was that we understand it and where it comes from. So I was aware from people telling me their concerns about the nuclear waste, and I shared that concern. I'll say right now, I am not a scientist, arts degree. But I knew that instinctively, nuclear waste, not so good in the water. And I've certainly learned a lot in terms of just talking to people and hearing their concerns, and from very, very, very good sources, very reliable sources of people who are experts. So my first conversations, I should say I did attend that conference in Gatineau just after I got elected. Actually, I think it was November 2018, and I was listening to people there. I had a friend who inspired me on it as well, and then the Council of Canadians came and met with me, and I had to say that I had a full plate. I'm the liaison on women and gender equity. I got assigned to 2 new committees recently, and I thought, whoa, but I said, just give me a little time and we'll work on it. And we thought in terms of presenting it to council because of the importance of this motion. But then we realized that we needed people to come out and speak on it and talk to it. So we referred it to a committee, because committees is where, I call them the sausage factories. That's where everything gets done. You have to pull everything in and you work it out. And that's what happened. We came in, and I'll admit we came in with a motion that I'd originally put forward, but we rewrote it, and we made some changes, and And the reason is because we wanted wide support, but we wanted to keep the intention of it. And we sought a lot of expertise. And I was really, really pleased with the results because it had real asks in that motion. And it meant that we were going to be able to get it through. The delegations were great. We had them from all sides. The nuclear industry was there. The consortium was there. We had regular residents. We've had experts. We had it all. So I was very pleased with the results and owe a lot of thanks to my colleagues who worked with me, and especially the Council of Canadians and people like Dr. Hendrickson, who was, and Lynn Jones, who were also a great help. I really appreciated it. So now it's done. We've got that motion. We've got it on the record of our concern as a city for our water supply. And one of the major parts of it too was the fact that we had the engineer who's in charge of our drinking water participate with us in crafting our motion and making recommendations on his concerns over the years of taking that water out of the river and making it ours. And it was great to have that collaboration. So, and you'll hear from Dr. Hendrickson about all his work, because he's done a lot of groundwork, and that's the kind of people we listen to and heard a lot from. So I guess I should leave it there because I probably went over. I don't know. I've lost track of time.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And we're going to come back, Teresa. So don't go away just yet, please. We may have some questions, but I just want to, again, from our office to yours, thank you for your leadership at the Environment Committee. And folks maybe what we can do, Samia, by the way, for everybody tuning in, this meeting is only really happening because Samia Raeda, the talented person who curates these spaces, is helping us make this happen. But perhaps Samia or someone else, if you could put a link to what Councillor Kavanaugh worked on at committee so people can follow that link and some of the media coverage. Again, hats off to you for doing that. That was fantastic. Verna, I want to pass the mic to you next, because as I understand it, our friends at Kitigan-Zibi have had a discussion on uranium in the water. You've, as you mentioned, women are water protectors. Help us understand on Earth Day this discussion from your perspective. And thanks again for being with us. Oh, I think you're still on mute, Verna, just so you know.
Oh, yeah, good. You'll have to read lips now. First of all, way back in the early 90s, a group of women, one of the women had this dream that we have to also bring back the water ceremony, because she was told that the issue of water is in a dream that it's only worsening. And for us, what happened in Kitigan-Zibi too as well is that we have uranium in the water, and it was naturally occurring uranium. So what happens is it's uranium in the rock, and when you would drill through the stone to make wells, the dust gets into the water table. And once it gets into the water table, you can't take that out. If you have a filter, what happens is you have to deal with the nuclear waste. So we've always had this discussion on the importance of the water, but more of an awareness of the impact of nuclear waste or uranium too as well. And now going back to we've also been reconnecting back to our sacred sites. And it's interesting that Chalk River, across the river from Chalk River, is one of our sacred sites. You have Wazo Rock, and they have the petroglyphs there. And I find it interesting tonight. I was just telling this to my son. I said, we have a trickster story there they call it Wiskejak, the trickster, and he always shoots himself some of the stories is he shoots himself in the foot. And I said, we're going to talk about tricksters tonight too as well, because what we're doing to the earth, we are shooting ourselves in the foot, really. For our need for economic growth, what are we doing for the next 7 generations? And even this connection to the water, and the water connects us all. But now going back now on a political point too as well is So with the court cases, the Supreme Court cases throughout the years, the Crown has a duty to consult. This was brought forward in the Haida and other court cases, the Haida court case, the lack of consultation. So the Crown has a duty to consult with First Nations. It's not just Aboriginal, it's First Nations because of the spirit and intent of the treaties. Although we don't have the treaty, our relationship as Algonquin, the Algonquin Nation, is with the Crown. So this is also enshrined in Section 35 of the Constitution. And one of the things I've been hearing there is also too as well that the duty to consult hasn't been carried out with, for example, this whole process too as well, even nuclear waste, even the renewal of the policy. From my understanding, the Algonquin Nation hasn't been consulted. I understand they may have consulted there's this other group called the Algonquins of Ontario, but the problem is they're people made up with questionable ethnicity. And that comes down and it comes to have the real First Nations been consulted and the process of that. So again, too, as well, that's where our concern is even still too, because our land is still unceded. So our concern is there's the cultural, spiritual understanding that we are caretakers of the earth. We are all caretakers of the earth. But also too as well, there's the legal context of that Canada has not fulfilled. So that's why I'm glad we're having this discussion tonight. So miigwech.
Pardon me. Next, I would like to pass the microphone to Dr. Ole Hendrickson. Dr. Hendrickson appeared with Councillor Kavanagh before the Environment Committee and is a subject matter expert in the subject that we're talking about tonight, water protection, the issues of nuclear waste. Dr. Hendrickson, when today is Earth Day, you're an expert in this area. What's on your mind as the community continues to look for answers, press for discussion? Please share with us your thoughts.
Well, thank you, Joel. I've been asked to discuss these proposed disposal projects, what they might do to the Ottawa River, and some of the risks associated with the waste that are at Chalk River. Councillor Kavanagh, we're so grateful for your leadership of the council motion regarding these proposed waste disposal projects. And there are a couple, actually. The on-site abandonment of the NPD reactor in Ralston, which was Canada's first CANDU reactor, as well as the 1 million-ton radioactive waste mound proposed at Chalk River. So the federal government's been doing research and development at Chalk River for 75 years. And that has left an unfortunate legacy of leaking waste areas, contaminated soil and groundwater, aging buildings with radioactive contamination. The city's motion has some really important features that I want to highlight. First, stopping transfer of federal waste from other provinces to Chalk River. So the federal government has a $1 billion a year contract with 3 multinational engineering firms to operate all its nuclear sites. That runs till 2025. And 2 of those firms are Texas-based, and one is S&C Lavalin. The federal nuclear sites include locations of 4 prototype CANDU reactors. There's the one in Ralston, another one at Douglas Point in Ontario, one in Quebec, and one in Manitoba. And all 4 have been shut down for decades, but they're still there. They're not fully decommissioned. The contract that the government has with these engineering firms calls for those firms to clean up those reactor sites by demolishing structures and shipping waste to Chalk River. So the companies developed what they call an integrated waste strategy that calls for consolidating all the federal waste that wouldn't get left at those reactor sites, bringing it to Chalk River. For example, the Canada's nuclear regulator, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, recently approved shipments of the Douglas Point reactor waste, which are in Kincardine on Lake Huron up the Chalk River. So that federal Douglas Point reactors is situated at the Bruce Nuclear Complex, which is the world's largest actually, where there's already a nuclear waste storage facility, which is operated by Ontario Power Generation. So one would think, well, we can store those Douglas Point waste at that Ontario waste facility, but instead the engineering companies want to ship those Douglas Point waste 600 kilometers from Kincardine up the Chalk River. Or consider the case of Whiteshell, Manitoba, Pinawa, Manitoba, which is also undergoing decommissioning. And those companies have already been shipping low and intermediate waste. And that's 1,900 kilometers over Lake Superior, through the north to Chalk River. And that's for temporary storage. And that's been happening for about 3 years now. But now they also want to ship the high-level waste fuel rods, the spent fuel rods, even though one of the candidate sites for permanent disposal of those fuel rods is Ignace, Ontario, which is only 400 kilometers from Whiteshell. So whatever your views might be on whether a deep geological repository is appropriate for spent fuel rods, sending those Whiteshell rods 1,900 kilometers to Chalk River and then 1,500 kilometers back to Ignace would make absolutely no sense. So unnecessary waste shipments increase risk of transport accidents. And this isn't just for people in Northern Ontario. If spent fuel from the Gentil 1 reactor, which is near Trois-Rivières, Quebec, goes to Chalk River for temporary storage, those high-level fuel rods would come right through Ottawa. But there's already waste from Hydro-Quebec's Gentil 2 reactor at that same location. So why not store the federal and provincial waste together and deal with them together at some appropriate time? Okay, another thing that the city motion calls for are safeguards to protect the river during demolition and waste transfer activities. Now, a lot of the structures at Chalk River contain long-lived radioactive waste, like the plutonium tower. There's a plutonium recovery facility. There are hot cells where they do work with fuel rods. And of course, 2 shutdown research reactors, the NRX and NRU. And structures such as the swimming pools or the pools where the fuel rods are kept cool after being taken out of the reactor. So all that's already at Chalk River. Let's assume those buildings eventually get demolished rather than being abandoned on site like the proposal is for the NPT reactor at Ralston, which is 25 kilometers upriver. So those demolition activities have to be conducted very carefully so as not to expose radioactive contaminants to snow, rain, and wind that could carry them into the river. Chalk River's active area, those reactors are only a few hundred meters from the river. So a key objective for dismantling contaminated buildings and managing their waste is avoid exposure to water. Don't let the waste come in contact with water. And that's a big problem with transferring waste to the proposed 1,000,000-ton Chalk River mound, where the contents would be exposed to rain and snow melt, which would require an expensive wastewater treatment plant to deal with leachate from the mound, because that leachate would get contaminated with lead, mercury, arsenic, uranium, plutonium, and a whole variety of other radioactive substances: tritium, carbon-14, cobalt-60, technetium-99, niobium-94, strontium-90, cesium-137, and it goes on, the list goes on. The water treatment plant can't remove all that stuff. Its capacity could get overwhelmed during an extreme weather event. So there'd be risks that untreated leachate would get directly discharged to the environment and flow through the wetlands and streams and lakes into the river. So why not examine an alternative design, not a mound, and an alternative location that would minimize those kinds of risks? So that's a second thing that the resolution calls for, which is to not let the waste come in contact with water and to protect the river during demolition and waste transfer. And a third really important thing is prompt notification of spill or release events. In August 2014, an accidental release of a large quantity of cesium-137 from one of the liquid waste tanks at Chalk River contaminated the Ottawa River food chain. This was not reported at the time, even to Canada's nuclear regulator. The release was only revealed 5 years later when a large fish was caught that had a high amount of cesium in its flesh. And cesium-137 biomagnifies and persists in the food chain. And there have been spills of tritium in the past, which is the radioactive form of hydrogen from Chalk River. And Chalk River produced many of the world's medical isotopes, which is something we're proud of. It's a good thing, but that left behind both liquid and solidified radioactive waste. And those are quite radioactive. They approach high-level waste. Most of the high-level liquid waste that was in something called the fissile solution storage tank has been shipped to the United States, but there's a so-called heel of residual sludge in the tank. A project to deal with that residual sludge was recently announced, but we got no details or any real opportunity to comment on that. And there are other tanks of high and intermediate level liquid waste that will need to be solidified and transferred carefully to avoid a repeat of that August 2014 spill that contaminated the river with cesium. So, and now it appears that companies operating Chalk River may start experimenting with extracting plutonium from irradiated fuel rods to produce plutonium reactor fuel. This could be part of the $50 million that the federal government just awarded to a company called Moltex, which has offices in New Brunswick in the UK. Producing plutonium, but not for reactor fuel, but for nuclear weapons, was part of the original rationale for establishing Chalk River in the 1940s. So research activities involving plutonium extraction have caused spills in the past. There's a place called the nitrate plant, which has a lot of contaminated plume coming from it. So there are real risks of radioactive releases from these kinds of research activities. Our Concerned Citizens Group for years has called for a transparent public environmental assessment of how to manage these radioactive waste at Chalk River. And we're cautiously optimistic about the call for a regional assessment of the federal disposal projects, such as the NPD reactor abandonment or the million-ton waste mound. This regional assessment would have to be properly scoped and properly resourced. Okay, finally, what are the risks if we don't act? If we don't have a transparent and public assessment of the safest ways to manage the current and future waste at Chalk River? Our children and future generations would be left with a burden that would become more and more difficult to address, especially if a wide variety of poorly characterized waste are simply dumped into a leaking mound. The river could become permanently contaminated. Large numbers of downstream residents would receive small but significant increases in radiation exposures. And one could argue, as do the companies that propose this, that health risks associated with small additional radiation exposures could be justified by the lower cost of disposing of waste in a mound. But does the public agree? Are we willing to accept those kinds of risks? There are already in the river tiny bits and pieces of fuel rods that came out of the process sewer from Chalk River in the past. The debate goes on. Is that acceptable? Should we leave them? Should we recover them? Which is worse? There are 4 groundwater treatment facilities that operate continuously to reduce quantities of mobile radioactive contaminants such as strontium-90 that are already in lakes and streams and wetlands. But it's good, at least we have those facilities to reduce those contaminant levels. But there are also 3 reactor cores that were dumped in the sand at Chalk River in 2 of the older waste management areas, A and B. And a pipeline was built in 1953 after the NRX reactor accident that was then used for nearly half a century to discharge liquid wastes in the liquid dispersal area, which is also near those old waste management areas. So this is all really well documented. There was a 2011 Ottawa Citizen article by Ian McLeod called Chalk River's Toxic Legacy. You can still read about this online. When the NRX melted down in 52, that story was kept out of the media so that public would not doubt the safety of nuclear power. But ever since then, the federal government has not been transparent about the extent of the contamination at Chalk River, and it has not ever really launched a public process to examine various alternatives for dealing with these federal wastes in an open and transparent manner. And in the meantime, the corporations that now operate Chalk River, and they are getting $1 billion of tax money a year. They have plans for substandard disposal facilities, new experimental reactors, waste shipments from across the country, and production of plutonium reactor fuels. So more waste rather than a cleanup of what's there now. So we really think it's time for a serious look at how our tax dollars are being spent and how we can protect the Ottawa River for future generations and ourselves. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Henscom, for all of that. That was, I know a lot of people who are tuning into this conversation are very well versed in this themselves, and others may be just brand new to it. So to have all that content in pretty efficient amount of time, given what you covered, we really appreciate that. Thank you very, very much. I'm looking at the clock here, and I think Samia had mentioned in the chat, we want to make sure you have an opportunity to weigh into this discussion. So we're going to open the floor in a minute, but I know there's a couple of people on the line here who have great expertise in this area too, and I want to take some opportunity to allow them to perhaps ask the 3 of you a couple of questions, if that's okay, before you have to leave us, particularly Councillor Kavanagh. I know you're busy tonight, so thank you so much for being with us. I think my friend Claudette Commanda is in the conversation here. Samia, could you help us ensure Claudette's camera and microphones on?
Yep, 1 second.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
I can hear you, Claudette. Nice to hear your voice.
Hi, how are you? How's everyone?
I am well. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Such a, well, I'll be honest, this whole conversation about nuclear waste and the plan for nuclear waste, you know, putting it by water, putting it anywhere for that matter, it is quite worrisome, very worrisome. And we have to think about our children. But look at right behind me here. See? We have to protect these little ones. If there's no water, if the water in the land and the animals will be poisoned, ultimately our children will be poisoned. But I want to thank the previous speakers for those excellent words, and Chimiwedge Verna for your powerful prayer and the teaching that you provided. It's very powerful. We need to continue to be reminded of those teachings that were passed on to us and the responsibilities that we have to the land and to the water and ultimately to the animals and all of creation. And we know that in our teachings and in our belief in our creation story, that we have, as Verna said, we all have a responsibility to protect Mother Earth. We all have a responsibility to respect her. That is a human responsibility of all humans And Mother Earth, with all of her creation, she has the right to be protected. First rights belong to her. And I always remembered my grandfather, the late William, he always said that. We have to come together. We have to come together to protect the sacredness. And when he's sacredness on many fronts, but water is so important. Like what Verna said, that teaching water and women, the connection that we as women, all women have to water, so important. You know, I asked these the questions, and I was taking some notes here, and you know, Verna's teaching, what she shared with us, is that, you know, what we do to nature, we do to ourselves. If we're kind to nature, nature will be kind to us. When we need to be careful what we do to her, and we need to be careful in how we do our responsibilities, always with the right intentions, and in a good way, because there's a difference between good intentions and right intentions. You may have good intentions, but you're not going to do them. That doesn't mean they're the right intentions. Some may say, well, it's good intentions that we, you know, we'll take this nuclear waste and we'll you know, we have a solution and how we're going to bury it and how we're going to make sure that it's not going to harm anyone. But that's not the right intention. Right intentions first and foremost, and then how you do your right intentions in a good way. That's ultimately so important. If we destroy the water and the land and the animals, ultimately it's destroying the people. So my question really is, and yeah, Verna, thank you for really raising that fundamental issue about the duty to consult the Algonquin Nation. After all, they're planning to put this here on the Ottawa River or any of our rivers. We're not going to accept that. And it's not just to protect the Algonquin people, the Algonquin Nation. It's all people. All of us have to come together to raise the concerns, to raise our objection. Because my question, and I remember sitting down with the Lakota people, sitting down with the Shuswap people, sitting down with other various nations, and even including my last conversation with my grandfather before he passed, is that how can you safely store nuclear waste? How? You can't. And why do you even create it? And then you create this mess and you leave it here that the people ultimately then have to worry about it. But think about this. No matter where you store this nuclear waste, no matter where you store it, whether you store it a kilometer from a riverfront or 100 miles from a riverfront, or you bury it in the ground, no matter where you store it, it will do damage to the environment. It will, absolutely. So we think about those wise words. I always reflect on those wise words, what one of my leaders, one of my heroes, Sitting Bull of the Oglala Nation, the Lakota people, when he said, what you do to nature, you do to yourself. And we have to be mindful. And, you know, I also want to end with this, Joel, that, and thank you for putting on this town hall. Thank you to the leaders, Teresa Kavanaugh as well, you know, to raising this fundamental issue that we have to protect the waters, we have to protect the rivers. We need to have people's voices included, that, you know, people, we, the residents, community members, grassroots, we, the people, our voices have to count for something. They have to be heard, they have to be listened to, they have to be understood, and they need to be respected, because we are all concerned about this. Absolutely. And if we're not concerned today, well, it's going to be too late tomorrow. And I'm concerned for my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, my children, myself. I'm concerned for everyone. And let us come together and let us put our strengths and our voices, and let's show those that need to listen to us that we the people, and it was Verna said earlier, it doesn't matter who we are, what color we are, what creed we follow, what title we hold. This is so important. It's so, water is life. Water is life. So thank you, Joel. And I know I'm getting very emotional here and very passionate about this, but what anything that I can do to help to raise this awareness, to help to raise the voice, to bring people together, I am here for this because it is so important. It's critical. As my grandfather said, we have to come together. We will come together as brothers and sisters because Mother Earth, she is depending on us. Chimigwech, thank you.
Thank you, Claudette. Thank you so much. Thank you for those beautiful words, and thank you for that beautiful picture of your granddaughter.
Yes, my granddaughter Quill, she was 2 years older. Now she's 15.
My goodness, what a beautiful picture.
Thank you.
I understand that my friend Angela Keller Herzog is also with us. Sonia, could you help unmute and put Angela's camera on? Hello there, Angela. How are you?
Hi there. Is the sound working?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. So, first of all, yes, thank you. Thank you, Elder Verna McGregor. Thank you, Elder Claudette Comanda, for coming and giving us your time and talking with us about this really important issue. I am speaking both for myself as well as I bring with me the resolution from cafes, the community associations for environmental sustainability. And Councillor Kavanagh, I think you're quite aware that we had many of the community associations express concern and also joined together their voices in opposition to the nuclear waste dump, which was the original motion in front of the council. So the question that I have, and I would like to pose it, I suppose, to all, including Joel, and maybe the NDP has a position. When we have kids and we want them to do something, then we have these tactics, right? And we say, okay, would you like to eat the broccoli or the beans? Would you like cauliflower or broccoli? That's your choice. You have a choice. You're empowered. But that's not really the real world, right? So in this case of this nuclear waste dump, the choice is not really, do we want the status quo where we have hazards that are ongoing, or do we want the entombment in Rolfton and we want the nuclear waste dump that's engineered? Those are not the only two choices. And that's what that council meeting was starting to sound like. There are other choices in terms of alternatives of not having a nuclear waste dump close to the river. And those are some of the choices that all was mapping out. And I was noticing that municipalities on the Quebec side of the river were saying we are opposed to the waste dump near the river. And I was noticing that there was a resolution of the Iroquois and Algonquin Nation that was speaking to opposition to close to waterways and protecting the water. So why is it that the city of Ottawa seems to be so complacent about having this nuclear waste dump as opposed to saying we oppose it? Why is it that for this issue, we do not take the logical position saying like, no, we would like the more safe option, even if it does cost more money, because that secure future for future generations is something we're responsible for and that we are willing to pay for.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you very much. I totally hear you. And thank you for coming with the support and the connections and the resources. I know how much you care about this discussion, and I know how much you've been organizing. So thank you very much. I'm going to ask any one of the folks who've spoken already to respond. What I would set it up by saying is I understood the motion that was passed to be very much, as I understand it, but Dr. Hendrickson, Councillor Kavanagh, Verna, correct me if I'm wrong. I understood the motion very clearly saying, the city was taking a very clear position that we do not want a new center of attraction for nuclear waste. This clearly seems to be what the industry's proposing this mound wants. They, as Dr. Hendrickson was saying, they want this particular mound to take on, am I correct, Dr. Hendrickson, the equivalent to 76 NHL hockey rink sized like an enormous capacity of waste. And I understood the motion that was passed to be taking a very clear position against that, against being a mass export site. But to answer what Angela is saying, clarify it for me, please.
Well, there's debate on this clearly, Angela, and we, you and I have discussed the idea that the way the mound is proposed, with the water being able to get into it and carry waste away, is just, it is not really acceptable. And the city has said that. Is there some way to prevent water from, we want a facility where water isn't getting into the facility. That's in the resolution, which is good. But with the current proposal, there doesn't seem to be any option that would do that. So, and there, as I mentioned, really other important things in the city's resolution that actually haven't been in the other resolutions, like stopping waste transfers and better notification provisions. So we don't have to wait 5 years. I mean, we're not in a perfect world. It's Earth Day. We know that we've got huge challenges of various sorts, but I really congratulate Councillor Kavanaugh, Councillor Moffat, and all the city councillors that voted for this, because I really think it's a very significant step towards looking carefully at a better way to do this.
Yeah, I feel confident in it. We are talking about stopping current and future import of and transfer of external Atomic Energy of Canada waste from other provinces. They did not want that, I'll tell you. The consortium did not like that. Increasing the safeguards, preventing precipitation, and asking for that for the regional assessment, I think was a big ask. And I saw somebody had asked about that. I can't stay very long. I have to leave for another meeting, but it's that's a big one. And that was the advice I got from Council of Canadians who had put that suggestion forward. We incorporated that in, and we are going to follow through and work on that. So I feel that it's a very action oriented. It's true we took that word oppose, but we put in a whole bunch of words that were action. I prefer action rather than being just an opposition party type motion. It's about asking for specifics, and that's what we did. And I was pleased with the fact that, and the important part is we got it through, so that we're there on record.
And is it fair to say, just reacting, Teresa, what you just said, and throwing to you, Vern, if it's okay, my understanding, looking over the deputations that folks from the nuclear industry did, is that it really is crucial for them to have this export function of this site. They want this to be like, it's having anything be except that would seem to be a massive deal breaker. I could be reading that wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. I wasn't there for the whole 8 hours. I just tried to take in what I could, Councillor Kavanaugh. But it would. Am I right in that impression?
Yeah,
okay.
They were not. This is not something. They were not happy with this at all. That we put that in, but we were very strong on it for the very reasons that Dr. Hendrickson has outlined in terms of transporting it, and the treatment of this being a dump site for across Canada. It's bad enough what's there, and it doesn't go away. We have to do something with it. We wish it never came about, but it did. And we need to make every effort to make it as safe as possible. And there is expertise there, and we're pushing for it. These are private businesses really that are operating this, and we have every right to be concerned that maybe they're looking more at dollars than they are at the overall safety of, generations from now. And as Verna and Claudette can tell you, generations from now are very important. And saying something's going to be okay, for 500 years, it's not good enough. Still not good enough. So we need that push. I appreciate that we got it.
Thank you for that, Councilor Cameron. So one of the things Angela mentioned, Verna, is, and I remember it was either you or Claudette told me about this, is that there has been already discussion on the Gatineau side of our National Capital Region with Algonquin and, as I just understood what Angela said, Iroquois leadership on this matter. And is there anything you wanted to expand upon on that, just so folks have a sense of discussion so far?
I don't see myself as the expert. I haven't been involved in the discussions on the Gatineau side. But what I've been hearing, though, is that there's a lack of policy in regards to policy development and the creation of nuclear waste, the handling of nuclear waste. So that's still in the, that's a main issue. The other thing, what I was looking at too as well here is also, what comes into play here is also jurisdiction. Whose jurisdiction this comes under, because you have the federal, the provincial, and the municipal. But again, too, as well, it comes back with, now we're forgetting about the Indigenous and the duty to consult. And where does this come from too as well? A number of years ago, there was also the issue with the Frontenac mine, with the open pit mining with uranium. And the only fallback that they had that led to the protest was also that the mine itself was on unceded Algonquin lands, because the people's lands who were staked out, their only recourse was back to the land is unceded. They went to the municipal office, they were sent to the federal office, but they said, well, no, mining is under provincial jurisdiction. So they went to the province and they said, well, no, you don't have subsurface rights. That's a municipal, so they were played off, and their only recourse was that it's on Algonquin unceded lands. And that led to the conflict. But at the same time, how do you settle that when it comes back to when you have the Supreme Court saying the duty to consult with the honor of the crown? After that whole issue came, I was thinking, the reason why it's important that our lands stay unceded. First of all, our understanding, as Claudette mentioned too as well, our ancestors told us, you don't sell the land, that it's given to us. But also too as well, the other part is, if it's unceded to, it's almost a safeguard for unbridled development, such as this. It's another safeguard, I think. So that's where again too as well, there's opposition, for example, with this land claim process and the spirit of intent of that. But from a practical perspective too as well, at the end of the day, by the land still being unceded, it's a safeguard for unbridled development, irresponsible development.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
I'm glad you're here. And as you know, in our motion, we're talking about call to action with Iroquois Anishinaabe Nuclear Alliance. What they had told us, the consortium has told us that they had been working with the Algonquins of Ontario. It's just like they think it stops at the river, and that they don't see it as a nation, and that concerned me, that they're dealing with it because they're in the province, and that's just they didn't get the big picture at all. So I must go.
Thank you so much for joining us.
I really do. But thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Take care, Teresa. Thank you so much. All right, Samia, I can only assume we have plenty of time left, at least another 25 minutes. Are there some other folks that would like to share? I'm sure my friend Evelyn Gigantes is here. I know there must be many others. Please, who's next, Samia? Help me out.
Okay, we're going to go to Jerome next, and we are running a little short on time and have lots of speakers, so I'll just keep that in mind for everyone else. But I'm just going to unmute Jerome and ask to start video, and there you go.
Thank you very much for inviting me to provide a comment. I'm a scientist by training, and I'm a water scientist. We use actually even a term that nobody knows. It's a limnologist, a freshwater scientist. And just a few comments. It is a really interesting conversation for a scientist like me. And what I would say too often, unfortunately, in Canada and almost everywhere, we've used the rule that dilution is the solution of our problems. And that's how we've managed and dealt with many issues. That could be nuclear waste. I'm not a nuclear expert by any means, but other things, chemicals, nutrients, and so on that ends up in the water. And I think what we are now starting more and more to realize as scientists is that we know to some extent what a chemical do to the environment and maybe to us, but we rarely know what a chemical plus another one do to us. And we are now, I think, extremely worried about multiple exposures, and that could be very much applicable to some of the compounds that Dr. Hendrickson named a little bit earlier in his remarks. All to say that we know sometimes a little bit about stressors individually, but we rarely know about the cumulative effects of multiple stressors. And we know that today things are happening all together. We have climate change on top of that brings some uncertainty and some things that we've never seen before, like tornadoes in the Ottawa regions. That's all new to us, and we know that these things are now possible. I would say, so the needs for looking carefully on how to manage nuclear waste is probably a topic that is going to increase over time, because in Ontario, at least, we have aging facilities. We produce most of our electricity from nuclear generators, and these facilities, we know we are expanding their life a few years each time, but we know that they are old. So there is definitely a need to look at the big picture here. How are we going to move forward with the energy needs that we have? And if we are to produce waste, and nuclear waste in particular, what comprehensive plans could be put together to manage it in the best possible way? We've heard, I think, Verna, I really, I learn all the time. I hear from First Nations, and you've mentioned the duty to consult, which is absolutely necessary. Even now, scientists, I think we now would always say, have you talked to the people and the communities that are involved with the particular questions? But my hope is that actually we are going to move much beyond consultation. Consultation, I hope, is the minimum that we can do. And in the future, it's about having some knowledge, and us scientists, we have knowledge that we can bring forward, but the people that must make the decisions must be also involved. And it may not include many scientists, but it includes all community members. And it's about making good decisions and involving the people that are affected, stakeholders and affected parties, to be part of the decision making. And maybe I'm wrong, but to me, it speaks to even a higher level than consultation. Dr. Hendrickson, you've mentioned the regional assessment. I will go with my question with that. I think it is a really good idea as a step forward to look at the bigger picture. And my question is that how do we make that happening? Is it part of resolutions from local governments, provincial, municipal governments? And which jurisdiction is involved? I'm afraid probably it is probably a federal jurisdictions for this type of analysis. But my hope is that, yes, that might be a way to get all the people together, providing their informations and views to be able to make a sound decisions on this important topic. And I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Mille merci. À toi aussi. Thank you very much for joining us, Jerome. There was a question there for you, Dr. Hendrickson, but if it's okay, I'd like to see if we can get through a few more folks who are queued up to speak. Samia, who are we next? And I'll just apologize to folks now. I'm going to be relocating myself because the phone is starting to run down and I do not want it to pass out. So I'm going to be relocating myself to my rideshare car from the great people at Communoto. That's how I get between Ottawa and Toronto. So I will pass it over to you, Samia, to just ask our next person to weigh in.
Okay, Monica's next. So go ahead, Monica. And I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all so much. I wasn't planning on speaking. I had some questions, and I also happen to have this book. I don't know. Verna, you probably know this book. It's amazing. And ooh, my video cut out, but I hope if you haven't read it before that you will read it, but it's called Nibi's Water Song by Sunshine Tedesco, who is from Kitigan-Zibi. And this book is fantastic because it gives you a glimpse of what community can do when they come together to speak together. And I always make a joke with people that someday we're going to realize how stupid we are for pooping in water. And that's sort of a segue into my question. So why, or my two questions. Why is the status quo today to dump waste in water? So no matter what type of waste it is, and the speaker before me was also mentioning our status quo is to dilute. And why is the status quo to pollute water in areas that do not get any media attention? So occasionally you hear about these things in the media and then all of a sudden it disappears. So if we didn't have these wonderful people here tonight who care, we wouldn't know about this. We hear it occasionally in the news and then it disappears, but really this is an ongoing issue.
That's a good point.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. Again, because we want to make sure a few more folks get to weigh in, I'm going to ask Samia to help us identify our next speaker.
Okay, the next person we have is Eva. Eva, if you can unmute.
I think I have. There we go. Yes. So I want to again thank Joel very much for holding this town hall and allowing more people to hear about this important issue. I wanted to ask probably Joel in particular, but others if they have any ideas. Are there ways that the Ontario government, we've talked about how all these different levels of government, different jurisdictions are involved, but are there ways the Ontario government could be doing more to press the federal government for better waste management at Chalk River? Are there any regulations or legislation that could be, leveraged? I think there's very much provincial jurisdiction around source water. Drinking water and its quality. And so that applies here, I think, in the sense that the Ottawa River is almost virtually the entire source of water, not just for drinking, but for all purposes, growing crops, hygiene, etc. It's for the city of Ottawa and for others who live along the river, it is our only water source. So could the Ontario jurisdiction have more weight or bring more pressure to bear to the federal level? Thank you.
It's a terrific question, Eva, that I don't know the answer to. So I'm going to have to make sure we do our homework and get back to you. But I absolutely think, Ontario, half of our electricity in the province is produced through the nuclear industry. And we do have a responsibility to actually make sure that Ontario's voice is heard of this. So Samia and I will do some homework and we'll get back to you. Samia, who's next?
We have Don next, and then maybe because we've taken a few questions after Don, we could give others a chance to answer.
Absolutely.
Hi. I've lived in Ottawa for about 20 years now, but I was in Thunder Bay for 35 years. And I guess somewhere between 30 and 40 years ago, we had this discussion when they wanted to transport nuclear wastes up to Atikokan then, and I guess Ignace was probably on the list as well. And it is so shocking to think that this thing has been just sitting there for all that time, and we're still talking about transporting waste to Ignace. But what's even more shocking is at that time we were fighting against drilling holes deep into the rock of Northern Shield to store this stuff. And when I hear Owl talking about what's going on at Chalk River, that sounds to me more like a landfill site, like we have to put our regular garbage in. I just can't believe that this is going on. And I guess that's it. Am I right? I guess my question to Owen would be, am I really right that what I'm hearing about from Chalk River is not much better than the kind of landfill site that we would develop to put in household waste in? Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Don, for being with us. It's nice to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. It's nice to see you. And Ol, did you have an answer for Don? And maybe if there's anything you want to say reflecting on other questions, and I'll ask Verna if you're interested in commenting on that too. Go ahead.
Yeah, briefly, yes, it's a landfill, and the environmental impact statement uses that term several times. The proponents say it would be a sort of enhanced landfill because of the bottom liner and the cap that they would put on it are probably a bit more than you would use for most municipal landfills, but still, that is indeed what is being proposed. And just really briefly on the regional assessment, this would be important because these projects started with what we call decide, announce, defend. The First Nations and the public did not have any opportunity in advance to discuss the problems at Chalk River. So a regional assessment is a fairly new process under the Impact Assessment Act, and the way it's triggered is by a letter to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. So that I assume will happen in due course. And I just also, one more thing on what Jerome said about cumulative impacts. Dilution is not the solution to pollution. That is absolutely true for nuclear waste. And even at the International Atomic Energy Agency says, keep it contained, keep it isolated, keep it out of the biosphere. So these kinds of projects are not what are recommended internationally.
Thank you so much. Verna, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Just really quickly, going back to Nabee's water song, we'd have a ceremony at Victoria Island, and one day we had a couple of MPs there, and we were about to close, and the elder said, do you have anything else to say? And then this story popped up in my mind that my parents told me, because my mother used to sit a lot with the elders, and they talk about all the stories. And one of the stories they said is, the funniest thing that they found with the newcomers coming to this land, the strangest thing is that they didn't honor the water, that we poop in it and we put our waste in it and we turn around and clean it and drink it. And because they said it's a different understanding, and how do you change that understanding? And again, too, as well, that's why we have to put your minds together to open your minds. And when we talk about consultation too, as well, this is coming back. We're coming back from this whole colonization, but it's finding our voice again to transfer that understanding too, as well, because it leads to, I think, innovation. But again, we always want to keep to status quo. The other innovation that they're talking about is what happens when you give the Ottawa River personhood, like they did in New Zealand. What happens when the river has rights such as you have human rights? Would we be building the nuclear waste storage so near it and dumping things into it if it had rights, like we have rights? That's just an observation.
Well, thank you, Verna. Something never occurred to me. That's fascinating. It's fascinating. Thank you. Samia, who do we have next?
We have Mike next. I think he's just, there you go.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, happy Earth Day, and thank you so much for organizing this meeting.
Pleasure.
So I like to make the point that it's important to understand actually what's at Chalk River. There are some radioactive substances that will be radioactive for thousands of years. So we have tritium, we have strontium 90, cobalt 60, cesium 137, iridium 226, and plutonium 239. Now, tritium has a half-life of about 12 years, but it's actually quite dangerous because it gets in our bodies, and it's like it's an isotope of, well, it can be incorporated into water, and it does its damage at close range. Plutonium 239, that has a half-life of over 24,000 years. So what they are proposing is really not appropriate for these radioactive substances, and it's really not appropriate to situate a waste dump with highly radioactive waste right next to the Ottawa River. And if you look at the resolution, the revised resolution passed by City Council, it's really a weak resolution. It does not talk about relocating the dump, or, you know, there's no talk of actually investigating alternative sites. So my question really is, can we really strongly urge them to relocate the waste away from the river? Can we, you know, look into possible solutions that would involve finding another location that's much safer, far away from the river and other bodies of water?
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for that. And you know, joining very much in the same theme Angela is raising. And let's get through a couple more questions before we go back to Verna and Ole on an answer. But we will continue the debate and discussion. As I understand it, countries like Norway have had this discussion about where to put nuclear waste and not to do what's being proposed. So I take your point. Take it to heart. Samia, who's next?
Brienne. Go ahead, Brienne.
Hi. Thank you so much for hosting this meeting, and thank you for the prayer too at the beginning. That was really beautiful. I guess I just have two questions. Are like, what are steps that like we as individuals can like take to prevent this from occurring, like for the nuclear coming on the Ottawa River? And then my second question is like, what can we do again individually to help clean the water that's already there? Or like, how do we, or how is it being proposed that we do clean the water? Because currently the water that is there is still suffering and it's in need of attention. So I'm just wondering, how do we go about navigating that and showing up and trying to do our part individually? So yeah, those are just my two questions, and thanks so much for letting me speak.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Let's try to have one more person before we go back to Verna and Ole. Samia, who's next?
Last person we have on the list is Mick. So go ahead, Mick, if you can unmute. There you go. Oh, we can't hear you, but you're not muted.
I can see you. There you are. Oh no. Oh goodness. Technology can be a fickle friend.
No, we can't hear you.
I can't hear you, Mick, unfortunately. Why don't we, Mick, keep working on, it may be a delay from your device to ours, so keep it open and unmuted, and maybe I can ask Ole and Verna to reflect on what folks have said, and we'll go right to you after, okay? We'll keep at it.
Well, in terms of another site, yes, I would hope that a regional assessment process would be looking precisely at that and looking at alternatives. Brianna, what can we do as individuals? Well, if it comes to this, if it really comes to a hearing before the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, I guess we're going to be asking for hundreds, if not thousands of people to ask to speak and express exactly what people have been saying here tonight. Can we ourselves clean the water? I don't think so, but the Ottawa River is a wonderful river. I drink the water. We all drink the water. We should continue to do so. And it's still quite a wonderful source of water. So let's celebrate that, recognize that it's our lives, it's what makes up our bodies, that river. So recognizing and honoring and saying it's sacred, those are all really important things.
Verna, anything you wanted to add to that? You're muted, just so you know.
In terms of alternate sites, I think that would be up to, again, like our scientists and the researchers, because that's not my area. But the other issue is a number of years ago too as well, a number of First Nations, such as Ignace, they were approached for nuclear waste storage. And I remember going to a session and they were trying to get other First Nations to become nuclear waste storage areas because of their location away from urban centers. So they're isolated, and they saw it as a form of economic development. My problem with that is then they were talking, they said, I don't know what's wrong with them. They have an economic development opportunity and it's safe storage. And I said, well, if it's safe storage and it's low risk, I said, so one of our teachings is a 7 grandfather teachings is you take responsibility for yourself. So I said, an example is if, for example, Toronto gets its electricity from the nuclear power, from the Bruce power plant, so taking responsibility also is maybe Toronto needs to have a nuclear waste site, storage site as well, since it's low risk. And I said, that would make sense, would it not? I said, but again, sometimes too as well, we're always seen as we're disposable, and we need to stop that in terms of this understanding too as well as Indigenous people. So that was, it sort of stopped the conversation here, but at the same time, it doesn't address the issue, but at the same time, it's just changing the paradigm too as well. The other part in terms of Brianna's thing is how do we find our voice? I think too as well, never underestimate the power of one person. I never thought I'd be here talking about nuclear waste here from my bedroom, from my computer, but here we are. And never underestimate your own internal power. The other part is also though too as well, what we say is also sometimes too, and if we get frustrated, don't let it overconsume you. And that's why we would say too as well, that's why you do prayer for the water. Or the elders would say, put down tobacco, ask guidance from your ancestors, because we all come from ancestors. And why do we smudge is because it's a reminder too, that you don't have to carry that whole burden for yourself, that you ask also guidance from your ancestors as well. So in addition to when you're asked, as Ole said, is when they need to have your voice at different hearings, that's where you take that opportunity as well. And I think but don't never underestimate your own power as well.
Words to live by. Words to live by, given the days we are in now. Mick, let's give you a try. Let's give you a try one more time. Mick, can you try your screen or your microphone? I see you've unmuted. I can't see your camera yet. Oh, technology is a fickle friend, and Samia could regale everyone in stories of ways in which I've absolutely misused it. All right, well, Mick, I'm sorry. If you have a second and you want to type your question into the chat box, we may have some time to make sure that Ola and Verna have an opportunity to react to it. But while you do that, if you choose to do that, I want to, because we're coming to the end of our time here, I just want to thank Ola and Verna, and of course, Teresa and all of you for taking part of this. I want to thank Angela and Claudette and all of you others who weighed in. And I just want to tell you, as the member of Provincial Parliament for Ottawa Centre, as someone who is a politician, I consider this to be a crucial political issue for our community. And it doesn't matter where you come from on the political spectrum, all of us, as Verna has said, as Claudette has said, we all have a responsibility to protect the water and work together in doing that. And I'm confident, just given the amount of email and interest that our office received in promoting this event, there's a lot of people in our community that want to be behind this. And, you know, my understanding again about what happened at the Environment Committee is that there was 8 hours of deputations on this. There was lots of people that want to make sure that this is done in the right way and not rushed. So I'm either this is Earth Day. I'm excited to be talking about an issue of water protection and protecting a crucial resource for 2 million people. I'm excited to be doing it in a way that acknowledges the land in which we're sitting, and the way in which we can look after each other. Do we see anything in the chat, Samia, from Mick?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm sorry about that, Mick. But I want to end, Verna, you're with us, for thanking you for all of your work as water protectors, all of your work engaged in this. Again, Councillor Kavanaugh and all of you. Happy Earth Day to all of you. We're living in a tough time right now. People are under a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. So don't forget, for the people you're allowed to hug them today, okay? And don't forget to be kind to yourself. And don't forget that this particular debate and this particular struggle is not going to end. We're going to keep this going. We're going to keep the pressure on. There are elections coming soon, I'm told, at many levels, federal, provincial, municipal, in your own community organizations. We will have opportunities to raise this and advocate for this. And you can count on your Ottawa Centre MPP office as a place where it's not our resources, it's your resources. We will get a chance to make our case and to defend our community. Thank you, Claudette. So nice of you to say so. All right. Take care, everybody. Again, hug those you love. Let's be kind to Mother Earth on this day and others. Bye for now.
Be rich.